Thank you. I didn't have the furniture ready for us yet.
I know.
I'm Ron Miller from TechCrunch, and Ramin is going to introduce himself and the company a little bit, and then we're going to talk about cloud and security. So you want to just like take a minute and tell them about what you do?
Great, thanks, Ron.
Not you personally, your company.
Right. Hi there, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ramin Sayar, and I'm the CEO of a startup in Silicon Valley called Sumo. We're about 7 years old. We're born and bred in the cloud, and our mission has been and continues to be to really help solve the pain of machine data, and particularly through machine data analytics platform that we've built. In a given day, we're analyzing anywhere between 100 to 200 petabytes of data, and we have 30,000 users in our system. Majority of those use our service to really analyze cyber threat and security, as well as ensure that their applications are performing and available as they embark upon digital transformation projects for the cloud.
So, totally appropriate for our discussion today. That's why they invited you.
Yeah.
So, it's 2017. The cloud is obviously growing in leaps and bounds, right? Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, they just had killer earnings reports, particularly around the cloud. And here we are at a security conference, at a tech conference, talking about security. Why are we still talking about this at this point in the evolution?
Well, I think despite the successes of all those companies and the platforms they've built, I feel that we're just at the beginning of the massive wave that we're riding here. Being that we're 7 years in the cloud ourselves, we faced a lot of headwinds from security folks in various enterprise organizations, not knowing how to address the need and demand from developers as they're moving to the cloud, because everything was so antiquated with respect to their processes, tools, and teams in terms of protecting data inside their firewalls and data centers. That whole model gets turned upside down. And what you've seen from Google and Amazon and obviously Azure with Microsoft is they're making it much more seamless to migrate workloads to the cloud. And the role we play in that is to help accelerate that adoption of the cloud in terms of modern applications. So back to your point and question here, why are we still talking about it? I think we just started to drop in on the biggest tsunami wave that's hitting the tech over the last 20 plus years. And the industry is just about to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's why we're starting to see some of those killer numbers, right? Because it's just growing. It's just like kind of taken off, even though it's been around for a while. So part of that is because of that cloud, we're able to produce more data. We're able to store more data, process more data at faster rate. And the IT pros that you were talking about that weren't prepared for this, how do they begin to take control of making that data secure when they don't control the underlying infrastructure anymore? What kind of tools are available to help them do that?
Well, funny enough, that's exactly what Sumo does to help
Amazing.
And so I think there's a few things that are important and to unpack from that question. One is around what do they CISOs and the chief information security officers and the cybersecurity teams need to do and think differently. And the second is, how do they become enablers of this migration and movement to the cloud? So on the first, what we've seen from a lot of customers, whether it's Twitter, Airbnb, Pinterest, to traditional enterprise customers of ours that span Land O'Lakes to WD-40, Marriott, they actually took a different approach. They actually started to partner the security team with the development team and DevOps teams, and now you're seeing the formation of what's now being called DevSecOps. And so instead of security being an inhibitor and a gate, they're an enabler to this migration and digital transformation initiatives that a lot of these companies, whether they're new code companies or old code companies, are having to deal with.
Yeah, and I think, when you talk about the born in the cloud companies that you just mentioned versus the more traditional companies that have been around for a long time and have seen wave after wave of change, those companies have, they're not ripping and replacing in most cases and just going to the cloud. They have their legacy environment, and then they have some applications going up to the cloud. So when you have that kind of hybrid environment, what are the challenges there in terms of understanding where the data is, how it's secure, and trying to make that all happen together when you have that kind of mixed thing going on?
Well, it comes down to access and control of the data in a lot of cases for the security teams. And not to pitch our value prop so much, but what we really make sure that we help the CISOs understand is we can give him or her that fine-grained or coarse-grained control of who gets access to what type of data. And in a lot of cases, it's infrastructure on-premise, it's application on-premise, it's user behavior on SaaS applications to what's running in the cloud. And how do you get a whole 360-degree view of that while delegating out access to developers or IT ops teams or customer support so they can take advantage of the powerful data that we're helping them analyze through machine learning and algorithms.
So, I mean, we were talking a little bit about this before, that, it's not, I mean, if you're going to the cloud, that's just like step one. Then there's containers and microservices, there's now serverless solutions.
Yeah.
There's these things that exist for like fractions of seconds and then disappear, and there's all this orchestration going on, making them work together. So from a security company perspective, when you start to look at those more advanced technologies that are being offered in the cloud, and it's much more than just a virtual machine that is very much akin to what you've used to be securing in the past, what kind of challenges do you face with those kinds of advanced technologies and helping your customers understand, how to keep those secure when they're not even probably quite ready for all of that?
Well, interesting enough, the first thing that we see from a lot of traditional enterprise customers as they migrate to the cloud is that their policies and procedures need to evolve, because suddenly the stack is different now. It's no longer a 3-tier web app running on a converged or discrete infrastructure that's very well contained. And by that, what I mean is a lot of the applications in the cloud now have anywhere from 50 to 200 API calls. And so you have to be able to ingest and analyze unstructured as well as structured data and glean insights into that with respect to threat and risk, at the same time operational visibility. And it goes back to the point I made earlier. It's not about security being the gate, it's about security being the enabler. And so a lot of the folks that we work with and partner with, they're being transformative in their position with respect to cloud adoption. So they're the ones that actually embark on the first proof of concept and then open it up to development teams, IT operations teams. And in that, what they do is they learn what their policies and procedures need to be for the cloud. So some vendors do it better than others with respect to their cloud platforms. If you look at AWS, they have capabilities around CloudTrail and VPC, and Azure's now adding that, Google's now adding that. So you're starting to see parity. And so your policies in the cloud are now being standardized a little bit more based on what the cloud platform providers are doing, but more importantly also based on vendors like Sumo and what we do with respect to providing you the policy management and security in a single SaaS and multi-tenant architecture that you can distribute out to multiple types of users and parts of the organization.
So, you talk about APIs, and you can have, hundreds of APIs running within an application. And the complexity that produces, I mean, it simplifies things for the developers, right? Because they can write some lines of code and they can get access to some super advanced technologies without having to write it themselves. But from your position as a security company, trying to keep those secure, you get more and more layers of things happening within that application, coming from a range of products, and that would seem to create a whole layer of complexity, because you have to think about all of those different products that are being used to create this application. How do you guys deal with not knowing every single thing that's going on in the background and having to kind of figure all of that out?
Well, this is where the beauty of machine learning and AI starts to come in. Actually, from our inception, when we started the company, we built algorithms to start to understand the pattern of data, because you can never keep up. In fact, if you look at the statistic, by 2020, there's going to be 16 zettabytes of machine data out there. And so put it in perspective for all of you, what does that mean? A lot of us use Netflix today, right? That's if you stream the entire Netflix library 30 million times. Okay, so there's not a human possible way today, let alone in 2020, to be able to analyze this stream of data coming at you. So what we've done is we've built algorithms in our technology that starts to look at pattern recognition, so that whether it's common services on Amazon or Azure or Google or infrastructure, or also threat because of bad actors, known vulnerabilities, we ingest all this data and simplify it down and give you a very in-context view of how your business is operating, how secure you are, and how compliant you are.
So you guys are using machine learning to try and keep up with all the things that are going on out there that hackers are doing. But now we're starting to hear that hackers are going to be using that too. So, it's going to be like this arms race of artificial intelligence and machine learning. From your perspective as a security vendor, how do you meet those challenges day after day as the people who are trying to get at that data that you're trying to protect get more and more sophisticated in their methods?
Well, I think this is a problem in the industry as a whole, and you're seeing it now with respect to public policy. You talked a lot about with respect to folks in Silicon Valley talking to the government about it. And I think the catch here for all of us is that this needs to be a network effect similar to what hackers do themselves. And the consortium of companies that need to come together and start to share what they've done and how they're addressing this is going to be really critical. The other aspect is users themselves. So in our platform, in our service, we've opened it up so our customers can start to share their experiences. And you don't always have to be the expert in using our platform and technology and query language, but you can share your experiences very simply through the machine learning algorithms that we've created, and now we're extending that. So as you enrich your own algorithms, how do you provide that back to the community of users? Right. That's the way you have to fight against it, I think.
So how do you get your customers involved in that and other companies? Because you're talking about getting competing vendors effectively saying we're going to share data for the good of the whole, right? Sure. Some customers are saying, sharing my data, really? I mean, how do you meet those kinds of questions when a customer says, I don't know if I want to do that?
So interesting enough, that's already happening with us today. We have well over 1,500 plus customers, and a lot of those are asking for us to enable them to collaborate and communicate with their peers. And right. It's not just the CISO and the security office, it's actually DevOps teams, site reliability engineers, tech ops, because they want to be able to share their own learnings and knowledge and not have to rebuild everything all the time. And so what we've done, which is distinctly different than other vendors in the space around security, is we built a platform that we've opened up to other partners to integrate to. In fact, we integrate to all the gateways, the user behavior analytics tools, the one logins and login identity type of tools, the endpoint tools. Instead of going and building those ourselves, we enable those technologies to integrate seamlessly into Sumo Logic so that our customers can get value. Now, as a result of what we've seen is customers are taking those discrete sources and starting to collaborate how they get visibility across them, build queries and dashboards, and start to share that within their community. Now they're coming back to us and saying, how do we make this more prolific outside of just sharing content, but more sharing in terms of our learnings? So now we've gone back to the community of ISVs and pulled them back into the conversation and started to look at that angle.
So another thing that I've been thinking about is like looking at this from the other angle. Not that that people don't trust that the cloud is secure; they trust that it's too secure. So are there cases where the customer trusts the cloud vendor too much with their data, and they're like, "What do we need you for?" AWS is like they're really good at what they do. So what do we need you?
Well. Being that we were 7+ years in the cloud, a lot of those services did not exist when we started. And so we had to build all of our PKI, all of our encryption, and so we've abstracted away entirely from just the core compute and networking and storage type of services. And as a result, we don't have access to any of the raw data. And we give our admins in Sumo Logic fine-grained control as to who gets access to what type of data. So usually what we find with traditional financial institutions, insurance companies, media, entertainment, when they look at all the certifications and attestations we have, PCI, HIPAA, SOC Type 1, Type 2, you name it, it's way above what they have.
Right.
So it's not about how secure we are, the cloud is. It's more about how secure is their mindset. Are they really ready to embark and embrace this new world? Because it fundamentally requires a new operating model of how security teams need to work with development teams. And I keep getting back to that because that's going to be the distinguishing factor between the losers and the legendary folks that break away in terms of companies.
You talk about the security teams and they're the people in the companies that are supposedly responsible for all of this. This is all changing really quickly. And, we were talking a little bit about this before, that there's a whole lack of professional, there's a real shortage of professionals who understand this stuff. So where do companies like you come in to help fill that gap? Because you mentioned two things. You mentioned a skills gap, and you mentioned an increasing amount of data and then a changing market. So how does anybody keep up with all of that?
Yeah. So to unpack that a little bit, I think unfortunately or fortunately, big data is a big buzzword, right? And usually what that means is a lot of vendors, a lot of investments, and we've seen that over the last 5 to 7 years. But you're hitting on something that's really the fundamental crucial point here. There's only so many data scientists that someone can hire. There's only so many security folks that are available out there. In fact, there's 2.5 times the number of security jobs available than security practitioners. So what do we do about this? Well, it doesn't just start with the technology that Sumo Logic builds and provides. It has to go fundamentally to how university programs and institutions are actually creating a different skill set. So we've actually worked with a lot of universities on how do you bring together computer science and obviously data science together, and how do we start to do research projects in certain universities so that we can actually bring that into the open source community as well as into Sumo Logic. So that's one aspect.
Right.
The second aspect is going back to how do you enable customers and partners to collaborate and share, okay? And so I've talked a little bit about the fact that our service enables that. And I think there's the third factor, which is interesting. And it goes back to the technology issue that I brought up earlier. We early on made some big bets, and we decided that because our vision has always been centered around democratizing machine data. That means bring the massive amount of data to the common people who didn't have access before. And how we're doing that is by writing algorithms. And the algorithms are learning constantly based on the behavior of the users in our system. So it's not just about artificial intelligence or machine learning, it's how the user's interacting with the information and the algorithms we've created to make them even enriched and more smarter because of the skill gap, right? And secondarily, because the environment is changing all the time. Before, a user had to remember stuff and write rules and correlations and try to understand a static environment and infrastructure. It's no longer a static environment. It's a dynamic environment. And threat is not inside, it's outside. So we have fundamentally been very disruptive technology from the get-go and learned with our algorithms to continuously address the skills gap, the technology gap, and the process gap.
Yeah, and it's sort of, we only have less than a minute here, but it's sort of, the idea that you keep hearing that machine learning is going to take jobs. Well, here you have jobs that are going unfilled, right? Because there's just not enough people to fill them. In these cases, it's not like taking jobs that people could be doing. Well, it is, but it's jobs that there's just not enough good people to do. So in that case, the algorithms then become a means of augmenting the humans who are already on the staff doing that work. Right?
Absolutely. So our view of that is very simple. Our machine learning and artificial intelligence efforts and strategy is about being an enabler, not a disabler.
Right.
And for a long time, IT and security have been disablers and not being able to keep up with the demand of the business, let alone the migration to the cloud. And so with one single platform with Sumo, you're able to enable the security teams, but also enable the businesses who are disrupting and moving towards digital transformation to be able to move at the speed of light.
And that'll take it right down. We're done. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.